Mr. Richardo Romero is currently Peru's trade representative to the west coast of the United States. Mr. Romero has the responsibility to lead Peru's strategy and efforts in the western states to maximize the benefits of the recently enacted trade promotion agreement signed between the governments of Peru and the United States. He's also a columnist of Espresso, a prominent Peruvian newspaper where he has a weekly column, Brújula. Was I close? Brújula Comercial, where he has been writing since 2003. Mr. Romero was chairman and CEO of Trading Consult, a consulting firm that he founded also in 2003 that provides advisory services to business and public institutions on issues relating to foreign strategic planning, project formulation, and foreign trade issues. From 2007 to 2008, he was the strategic advisor for the business development of PricewaterhouseCoopers, obviously you know, a prominent accounting firm. And from 2002 to 2003, he served as executive director of POM Peru, Peru's export promotion agency. He has also served as the chief executive officer of COMEX Peru, Peru's leading trade business organization. As appointed by 3 presidents, Mr. Romero formerly served as the alternative representative of APEC Business Advisory Council from 1999 to 2004. As the Peruvian representative to the ABAC, he interacted with heads of state from 21 member economies, as well as within ministries of trade and foreign Global 500 corporations. He had the responsibility to represent and defend Peru's national priorities and interests through prominent lobbying and public relations networks. From an educational standpoint, Mr. Romero has studied law from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. I understand that to be Spain's top academic institution. He was also educated at Chapman University and at the London School of Economics, which, if you're unfamiliar, is one of the top schools in the British Isles. Very, very well educated and wonderful to have that experience. He has a BA in political science and international economics, a master's degree in management, and more recently, Mr. Romero has completed a program on trade policy at Harvard University in the John F. Kennedy School of Government. Please welcome Mr. Richardo Romero.
Good morning. Thank you for that amazing or generous introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank the university for this invitation. It is an honor for me to share with you the success of Peru. And the way I'm going to do it is, I think, is the best way in terms of understanding the relationship between private sector and the public sector and how together Peru has been able to rise from difficult times in the 1980s. I am about to tell you a story about a country. I was earlier meeting a small group of students, a story of a country that I never thought I could ever tell. I'm from a generation which, when I was 20 years old, I didn't see any future in my country because of terrorism, and the economy we were in pretty much in bankruptcy, but we turned things around, and I think this is a successful story. So without further introduction, let me go into the presentation. Is it on? Can you hear me? Perfect. First of all, I'll tell you a little bit about Peru rather quickly. Then I will talk about this partnership I mentioned, the commercial relationship between Peru and the United States, and which has been a successful one for us, and definitely for the United States as well. And some indicator of success as a result of all these other things that I will explain. As you know, I don't know if you're very familiar with Peru. Peru is it's a country that has a lot of natural resources. We have mining, we have energy, natural gas, oil. We have the coast, of course, a lot of seafood products that has positioned us as a great supplier of seafood to the world. We also have a lot of, the main exporting industry for Peru is agriculture, so there is a lot of agriculture in Peru, both fruits and vegetables. And then something interesting about Peru is that we have the coast, the Andes, and the jungle. So we have three different weathers in the same country at the same time. So I think that makes Peru a quite diverse country in terms of resources and in terms of its own geography and its own people. We are a country that has a gastronomy, for instance. I don't know if you're familiar with the Peruvian gastronomy, that it's a fusion of different cultures. We have a large presence of Chinese immigrants that came in the 1800s. We had also the influence of Japanese food in our own cuisine. Of course, the crops from the Inca times and the influences of the Spanish cuisine as well when they came into the Americas. So it's a combination of different cultures that is a reflection of what Peru is today. We are a country of about 30 million people. We have a GDP per capita over $7,000, according to 2013 figures. We have, of course, the currency is the Nuevo Sol, and we're one of the fastest growing economies in Latin America, and it will continue to be for the next 2 years, according to the recent forecasts of the World Bank and the Monetary Fund. But let me get into this relationship between the private sector and the government. Let's look at the government first. Of course, we have the president, we have the office of the prime minister, and then we have the lead sectors that work directly with the private sector when it comes to the relationship of Peru with the rest of the world. We're talking about economic and trade relationships. We have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have all the embassies, the consulates around the world. We have the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, which is us, the trade commissions. We have trade offices around the world, 36 offices around the world. Then we have Peru. Peru is the agency that promotes Peru abroad. And then we have the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and they have Proinversión. Proinversión is the agency that promotes investment for Peru. Then, when we go to the third level, we have the different roles that we do. Something that I should share with you. I was 7 years ago when I took this post in Los Angeles. We're part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today, we're part of the Ministry of Foreign Trade. Even though we're 36 offices and we're in charge of promoting investment, trade, and tourism, with 36 offices, you cannot cover the entire world, or at least the countries in which we have a diplomatic presence. That's when the embassy, the consulates become a complement of the work that we do. So they also do promote investment, trade, and tourism, and especially in places in which there is not a trade commission. So we complement each other. And of course, then we have Proinversión. Proinversión, when it comes to doing roadshows, international roadshows, they have to work with us. In fact, we yesterday had a couple of meetings, and we are organizing an investment roadshow, probably in May or June of this year in Salt Lake City, with Zions Bank, potentially, I think it will be with Zions Bank, and the Office of the Governor for Economic Development of Utah. So it's our way to link this strong relationship that the state of Utah has with Peru which I'll tell you a little bit later. So Proinversión, of course, will be the main player in this effort on behalf of the Peruvian government. It will be, of course, putting everything together with all the local players. Then, if you look at this relationship at the macro and micro level, this is the one, it should have been before that one. Then the trade representatives, me, the Trade Commission. Then we have Peruvian businesses, so the exporters from Peru. And then we have the buyers from the United States. Because what we do is our main responsibility is to generate business opportunities for Peruvian companies. When it comes to a US company wanting to export their products to Peru, there is the US Commercial Service. We work with them very closely to refer to them those US companies who want to sell their goods to Peru. But we work with all different organizations. We work with From Peru, we work with Proinversión, which I've mentioned already. We work with different business associations. We work with local authorities and academic institutions as this one. All those players are fundamental for us to be able to generate those business opportunities. And of course, to make everyone know what Peru is about, what Peru is doing, and how Peru can become an attractive destination for investment in this case, or could be an attractive supplier of food or clothing or different products that we export to the world. And when you look at, or you define the relationship at the macro and micro level, of course the government or the state, what they do is they generate the policies to facilitate that development, to put the regulations in place that would enable companies to export their products. And that's when trade agreements have become a very important tool and instrument, which I will explain a little bit later. At the micro level, of course, what we do trade shows, we do trade missions, we do business rounds, research, so on and so forth. Because if we are here in the market, we must know what's going on. We have to know what the trends are of consumption of different products that are of interest for us. We need to understand what's going on. We also need to build networks. We need to have contacts, because I think the value of a trade commission or the US Commercial Service, no matter what, it's your ability to open doors, your ability to facilitate the access for the companies that you work for. These are the offices that we have around the world. We have 4 offices in the United States, one in New York, Washington, D.C., and Miami, and the newest one, which is our office in Los Angeles. I took that post in 2008, and I was given the responsibility after Peru signed the trade agreement with the United States to open that office, which was a challenge. It's been quite rewarding personally for me. We've seen how this relationship has expanded for Peru and also for the United States, because one of the things that I found when I got here in 2008 was that it was not only about telling US companies to buy products from Peru, but it was also about convincing Peruvian companies to do business with companies in the Western United States. What happened is most of the flow of goods and services between Peru and the United States was in the Eastern United States, Eastern ports, Miami, Delaware, Philadelphia, New York, primarily. Not so much California in this particular case, but that has changed to the point that 28% of all goods that come to the US go through LA ports and the port of Seattle. So it has been a challenge for us, because why would I convince a company based in Los Angeles if a company in Peru would not be willing to sell their products to them? So it was about educating Peruvian companies about the potential at the time of the ninth largest economy in the world today, the seventh at the time, today the ninth. So there is a lot of potential. It still is, we have 13 states as part of our jurisdiction, but California is just like a country, and it's so hard to get out of California. And for instance, one of the things that we do is we organize trade missions with U.S. companies, and we bring them to Peru. And we decided that we have to work with companies that have never done business with Peru, that don't know anything about Peru. And I thought it was going to be a challenge, and it has not been a challenge at all, because we find every year a lot of companies that don't know anything about Peru. They don't know anything about the trade agreement between Peru and the United States and the benefits of that trade agreement in terms of market access and becoming more competitive in terms of selling their products into Peru or vice versa. Going into the trade agreements, we have signed trade agreements not only with the United States, we have trade agreements with Japan, with China, with Mexico, with the European Union, with Chile. We're part of associated member of Mercosur. We're also part of the Andean community. So that has allowed us to export our products to different markets. So we have diversified the number of markets that we sell our products to, and 96% of our products enter to all those markets duty-free, which is a great advantage for us. So trade agreements are fundamental. They're fundamental not only as an economic policy that generates growth, but also as a tool to attract investment as well. Because I cannot, and I do this all the time, I'm always talking to investment bankers, private banking, and they always ask, okay, fine, Peru is great, excellent growth, but what about access to regional markets? It's a very basic question, because if they look at Peru, Peru is a country of 30 million people. It's not that big. So if Procter & Gamble comes to Peru, they're in Peru, of course, but let's say a company like Procter & Gamble, if they look at Peru as a possibility to invest, they would not invest in Peru just for the 30 million potential consumers. They have to look at the region, and they will ask, okay, so what about access with Chile? What about access with Brazil? What about access with Argentina, and so on and so forth? So trade agreements are very important, and we learned that in the 1990s. Peru was a closed economy, an economy that was not open to foreign markets, and we learned the importance of opening the economy. And we've been doing this for over 25 years, and it has become very important for us. But now let me get into the trade agreement with the United States. And I think this is a very interesting story. It was a process that began in 2005 and it ended up in 2009 with the enactment and put into effect of the agreement on February 1st, 2009. 5 years, so imagine negotiating 5 years. The negotiations didn't take that much, as you can see. It took about a year. But the problem was approving this trade agreement both in Peruvian Congress and the U.S. Congress. But what the main problem was in the U.S. Congress, because the politics involved with that process. When the agreement was approved in the House and it went to the Senate, that's when everything got stalled. The negotiations stopped there. I mean, the negotiations already had finished. Both the executive of Peru and the executive branch of the United States have decided, okay, this is the document that we want to sign. But of course, in both countries, Congress had to approve them before it can become the law of the land. And what happens is Democrats, because of course at the time President Bush was in office, and the Republican Party was in favor of signing the agreement as it was written at the time. But the Democrats They had concerns about labor and environmental laws. They claimed that Peruvian regulatory system when it came to labor and to environmental issues was not to the standards that they expected. So we had to, what happens is the trade agreement has a provision that allows either country to request an amendment. And that amendment is done through a letter, very simple procedure. So that's what happened. So it took us a while. We had to hire a lobbying firm to work with Congress. We spent quite a bit of money, tried to get the politics aside, but that also, it involved, on our part, to make commitments in terms of changing our regulations in terms of labor and the environment. And so when we came into agreement, the agreement was approved on December 4th, 2007. And it was interesting for me personally because I happened to be at the Senate chamber and I saw the voting. And it was very interesting for me to see how the senators voted this trade agreement. It was a personal experience after being part of this process in a different level and being on the floor and seeing that finally the document was approved in the Senate was a very interesting experience for me. Finally, the agreement was signed and the implementation process took about 2 years. So what's the implementation process? What happens is you agree on a document, the document passes both Congresses, and then it becomes the law of the land. So that means that both countries needed to amend different laws in order not to have conflicts between the agreement, what was written in the agreement, and the different laws that were part of the 21 chapters that was part of this trade agreement. And issues like investment, market access, textiles, property rights, so on and so forth. So it was the very first trade agreement that Peru had, a comprehensive trade agreement that Peru had signed with any country. After that, that trade agreement has become a model for us when we negotiated this agreement for all the trade agreements we have signed with the European Union, even with Chile and other countries. So, but now let's look at the numbers. Something that most people don't know is that people ask, but how Peru benefited from this trade agreement? In many ways. But people always looking for the numbers. So, okay, but how much your exports increased because of the trade agreement? Well, the growth was as it was before the trade agreement, an average of 10%, 12%. But the thing is, if you look at these numbers, look at the growth for the exports from the United States to Peru. The growth is larger for the US than for Peru. So if you look at the numbers, you'll see, oh, well, the trade agreement was better for the US than for Peru. But not so, because Peru has been granted preferential treatment since 1991. It was a unilateral decision from the US government at the time to create what was called the ATPA, the Andean Trade Preferential Act. What that act meant or was duty-free access to 4 countries, Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. So about 85% of our goods will come to the US market duty-free. So we've been having this access for a long time before the trade agreement. So we have been enjoying this access for a long time, while the United States had to pay an average of 10 to 12% duty to come into Peru. So that's why the difference in terms of the growth, and more significant growth for the United States. So what happened with the ATPA and why we wanted to sign this agreement, it was because that ATPA program had to be approved by Congress every so often, every 5 years, every 4 years. It changed all the time. And there were sometimes gaps in which Congress will not approve it right away. So that created problems for exporters. And so what the trade agreement did for Peru in this particular case was to make this access permanent. So there will not be any approvals in the middle. It's permanent. We would always have, and we also increase the number of products that we can bring into the United States duty-free. Instead of having 85%, now we bring over 95% of our goods into the United States duty-free. While the United States, 85% of its products go into Peru duty-free. So that's a good example of the benefit in terms of numbers. Now, of course, there are other benefits in terms of investment, in terms of market access, property, intellectual property, so on and so forth. But those, you don't see those. You see this. You see these numbers. It's difficult to measure the other aspects of the access to the market. If we look at what Peru exports to the United States, as I said, the main industry for Peru is food, both fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables. We also export seafood. We also export clothing. The apparel industry used to be, before the crisis of 2008, the #1 exporting industry to Peru, to the United States. Now it's not anymore. Now it's at #2. Because we depended on the performance of the market. And retail sales of clothing in the United States since 2008 were going down about an average of 25% a year for 3 or 4 years. So it was a disaster. So that affected China, Vietnam, Peru, Mexico, all the countries that supply clothing to the United States. Well, now the industry is doing much better because, of course, the U.S. economy is doing better as well. But it can never go back to what it was before 2008. There is no way, because agriculture has grown so fast that in order for them to catch up with that growth, it will take a lot of investment. So then we have, on the side of traditional export commodities, we have, of course, silver, gold, copper, and it's not copper there, but copper should be there. Fish meal, coffee, and so on and so forth. What the United States exports to Peru? Manufactured goods, computers, phones, machinery for construction, for agriculture, that kind of stuff. So it's a complementary relationship. It's the perfect relationship. I don't compete with you. Of course, there are certain sensitive products that when it comes to the reduction of duties, there is a schedule. It will take, for some products, 15 years, 20 years, especially for grains. That was a sensitive product for the United States, meats as well, and for Peru, some apparel products. So there is, to open the market for those products will take longer, and the reduction of duties will be an increment of 1% per year in 15 years, whatever the rate is for each specific product. Well, all these things that I've told you about, the relationship between the public sector and the private sector, what Peru is all about in terms of resources, the trade agreement and all the trade agreements we have signed have contributed to, for instance, if you look at the exports of Peru to the world in 2003 and 10 years later, you'll see $9 billion 2003, $41 billion 2013. 5 times growth of exports. So that's an incredible number, and that's because of the trade agreement. So some people would argue that trade agreements damage local industry, and If you ask me, if you're not efficient and you can compete, you have to be out of the market. You know, we're a free market. You need to be competitive because at the end of the day, the customers, the consumers will benefit from that competitiveness, and that's what we look for, and that's what we should encourage, and that's why Peru became a market economy since 1992. And if we look at foreign direct investment, if you look at Peru in relation to other Latin American countries, or Latin America itself as a whole, you'll see that the percentage of investment as a percentage of GDP, Peru is 4.6% higher than everyone else in the region, even the average in the region, which is 2.7%. So that's another indicator of how well Peru has been doing for the last 15 years. And then look at foreign direct investment, you know, look at the numbers, $9 billion 2014. Another indicator will be GDP growth. Look at the numbers, 2004, you know, up to 2014. Positive growth, of course, 2009, 1%, and no one grew. I mean, we had positive growth, which is good. Most of Latin America had negative growth. And so that was, even it was only 1%, we were good in comparison to other countries. And so that's another evidence of Peru's success because of the reforms that were implemented in the 1990s. And then if we look at real GDP in terms of other Latin American countries, you'll see Peru will grow, will continue to be the fastest growing economy in the region. So that's also good. And it's about all the efforts that we do in terms of promoting, in terms of developing the businesses in Peru, but also having the right policies that allows the country to continue to grow. Peru has depended in the last few years for its success on two things, investment and exports. But today, we have a third element that is very important, which is domestic consumption. Today, Peruvians have more purchasing power, and that's very important for an economy. It's very healthy. Look at the reduction of poverty. You know, 2004, poverty, the population 58.7%. 2013, 23.9%. We have accomplished the largest reduction of poverty in comparison with the rest of Latin America. And that's a result of all these other things I told you about, exports, investment, and trade agreements. It's all tying together. If we don't have these things in place, we have not been able to accomplish. Someone asked me a question this morning about, in comparison to other Latin American countries, if corruption was an issue perhaps for other countries not to be able to accomplish greater levels of poverty reduction. And I told him, well, there's corruption everywhere. I don't know if the lower levels of reduction of poverty had to do with corruption in other countries. I don't know, I couldn't say. But in the case of Peru, the reduction of poverty, it's about providing means for people, especially who live in rural areas, to create opportunities, you know. And so what has been done in the last few years is bringing energy, water, building schools, building roads. If you don't have that, there is no way that you can bring opportunities to, especially to rural areas. And so that's what has been happening. And of course, there have been other social programs that have contributed to reduction of poverty. And it's a group of different policies that need to be in place in order for us to be able to accomplish those numbers. And I think the best way to show you the result is, this is the expansion of retail in Peru. Now, Lima is, you see in 2000, you see all those logos? That's Lima. That's where most of retail was, the presence of retail. But 10 years later or 11 years later, look at this, the expansion of retail in the entire country, you know. And that has been a result of everything I just told you, you know, the reduction of poverty, the economic growth, the investment outside Lima. There was a saying in Peru long time ago that Lima is Peru and Peru is Lima. That's not longer the case because it used to be like that. Everything happened in Lima. You know, when you were thinking about doing business in Arequipa or any other city, it's like, what? No, no, no. It's Lima. That's the place to be. But not anymore, which is good. That's healthy. And that is a result of reforms a few years back that were directed to decentralize the country, to generate the conditions to bring opportunities, to provide resources to regional governments, because Peru is divided by regions, and for them to invest in schools, social programs, you know, all those things that are necessary for the population to benefit from. And I think this is the best way to show you how this growth is being enjoyed by most Peruvians. You know, because a lot of people would say, oh yeah, well, you know, Peru is growing an average of 5% or 6%, but who is really seeing the benefit? Well, not everyone. I mean, I won't lie to you. I think we still have a long ways to go. I think that none of the things that I've told you this morning will be sustainable if we don't make or put in place the second generation of reforms, as we call. And those second generation reforms are about education, are about the development of technology, are about research, transportation, infrastructure. If we don't have those things in place, we will not be able to bring more opportunities. We will not be able to be more competitive in terms of, for instance, the movement of goods within the country and outside the country. We need more ports, we need more roads, we need a better railroad system, which will help Peru to have a sustainable growth in the long term. You know, one good example of it is, you know NAFTA. I'm sure you're familiar with NAFTA and the relationship between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And it's logical. I mean, you guys are next to each other. You know, and Mexico benefited greatly from this relationship. You know, all the maquilas went to Mexico. A lot of jobs were generated in Mexico, and it's great. We have a giant. Did I do something? Can you hear me? Okay. We have a giant right on our border behind us, Brazil. And we grew, and we tried to export everyone and have a relationship with everyone but Brazil. You know, and it's not like we didn't want to. It's because Brazil didn't want to either, because Brazil was a very close economy. It has opened up. It's still difficult to do business with Brazil, but an association with Brazil, which we have today, has benefited Peru in many ways, especially the neighboring cities, because there's more interaction, more trade. And as part of that strategy, what we created was a program called La Interoceánica. Interoceánica is a system of highways that would connect Brazil with Peru and would allow Brazilian companies to take their goods through Peruvian ports to Asia. Because taking them out of Puerto Santos, for instance, in Brazil, in the Atlantic, go all the way down and go up, too expensive, will take too long, faster through the roads. Well, I mean, most of those roads have been built already. And that has changed the dynamic of that relationship. That's what I said. Infrastructure, it's fundamental. If we don't have infrastructure, we cannot dream of greater growth or greater reduction of poverty. So it's many things that a country like Peru, which is enjoying this fast growth, is going faster than our ability to react and do these things rather quickly for us to grow at greater rates than 5%. You know? And if you go to Lima, for instance, if you ask me, it's chaotic because there's so many cars. You know, because now Peruvians have so much money, they buy cars, they buy new cars. And the infrastructure that we have in the city is not ready for all those cars. So this growth is just going very quickly, and we need to catch up. But it's part of the process. Everything came too fast. We never dreamed or imagined that this will happen so quickly. And 20 years, 25 years is not such a long time for all the things that we must do for us in order to continue the growth that we have enjoyed. Well, that's what I have for you. I wanted to share with you, I think I was asked to share with you my experience, my personal experience in relation to everything I've told you about. I've been in trade for 23 years, both in the private and public sector. I think when I was younger, I dreamed of becoming a lawyer. You know, I always wanted to be a lawyer. But when I went to law school in Spain, I realized this is not for me. I hated it. It was very hard for me to disappoint my family. And I kept studying at least the first year because I wanted to quit after the first month of school. This is not for me. But it took me a year to have the guts and make the decision. Something that I did know is that whatever I did, it has to be international. Whatever I decided to do has to involve international affairs in one way or another. I knew that much at least. When I left, I did just 1 year of law school in Complutense in Madrid. Did not finish. Most of my friends, when I was 19, 20 years old, they would say, but you wasted 1 year of your life. I said, no, I don't think I did. I think I realized what I like and what I did not like. So it was good for me. And from that point on, I was very focused on what I wanted to do. That's why I've been in trade for such a long time. Of course, at the end, to get to the position that I am today, I mean, for me it's an honor to represent my country and to talk to students like yourselves and other different audiences about what Peru is all about. I get excited because, as I said when I started my presentation, I never thought I could ever tell this story. And when I was 18 years old, I was very frustrated and very scared about what am I going to do next? Because to be honest with you, I couldn't go to the movies because we had a curfew. You know, we couldn't leave the house after 6 p.m. 18 years old. What the heck? You know, I want to have fun, but I couldn't. You know, we had to stay over in a friend's house, and that's what Peru in the 1980s. But thank God, everything changed. We were smart. We understood what we needed to do. Politicians learned to build on the success of the previous administrations, and that's why Peru is what it is today. And being part of that story as a promoter and as someone who represents the country, it's a personal honor, and also I feel blessed by the fact that that responsibility has been trusted in me because at the end of the day, you know, how people perceive you, how people see you, is how they see the country, you know, especially in the role that I am as a representative of my country. So it's very important, at least in my experience, to be consistent in terms of your ethics, in terms of what you want to do in your life, and focusing on and being persistent and being patient. Very important, patience. You know, when you're young, you want to do things, you know, one way, and they don't happen that way, or you don't get what you want, you get all upset or emotional. No, patience. Try a different way. Persistence is very important. My job, it's very tough, very difficult. Yeah, since I'm talking to you guys, this is easy. This is very easy for me. But dealing with the politics behind of the work that I do, it's very tough. Because then I'm in a position that I'm a target for many things. And I have to handle those situations in a very professional manner. And I don't know, you guys, some of you are graduating perhaps this year, some later on. But I think the most important thing, at least it was for me, is to be honest to yourself first than anything else. I'm sure friends, family have expectations, but you cannot run your life based on other people's expectations. You have to run your life based on what you want, what makes you happy. Because if you do what makes you happy, you will be successful. If you do or study something because your parents want you to, you will not be happy and you will not be successful. Because if you're not motivated by what you do, I don't think you're going to make it. At least it's been my experience, And you'll make mistakes. Yes, I have made a lot of mistakes in my life, but you correct them and you build based on those mistakes. And that's part of growing up, and that's part of becoming a strong person, and that's part of becoming who you are and who you want to be, And with that reflection, I want to thank you for the invitation, and I hope this information was useful for you to learn a little bit about Peru. And if you ever want to visit Peru, and if you ever need or want to be involved with Peru, I invite you actually, and I'm going to go to the next slide and put my email right there. We have had interns in our office in the past. Actually, with UVU, we had 2 interns. It was an amazing experience. I mean, I like coming back to Utah because I've always felt very welcome. And the relationship between the state of Utah and Peru, when I came the first time 4 years ago, I was like, seriously? I had no idea. It's very strong. And we've built this relationship with the state based on that tradition and that strong relationship. And so if you're ever interested about Peru, we're more than happy to help you. We have a staff, a team that we can help you out. And if you want to join us for an internship, that too, we'll take you into consideration. That's my email. And once again, thank you so much.